I'll put in the chat as well as the landing page that we have for you on the QB Power Hour, so you can share that. That'll have the slides and a link to book a demo with you guys.
Nice.
All right, and there we go. I'll go ahead and start the broadcast of the webinar. And we should be starting letting folks filter in. Welcome to another QB Power Hour brought to you today by Ignition. So today we're going to be having, you may notice that Michelle's not here. Michelle is actually on a cruise. She was hoping to join us with coming in from wherever in the world she is. I think she's near Buenos Aires or somewhere near Argentina or South America. I'm not sure exactly where that is in the world. And I'm up in the Pacific Northwest, so this is kind of like a where in the world is Dan and Michelle? But playing Michelle today is going to be Jennie Moore and also Ryan from Ignition, and we're going to be talking about the state of engagement. They've done some research about engagements, and we'll talk all about that on today. So pleased that you're joining us today. As everybody knows, Michelle is always a feature of the QB Power Hour. My name is Dan DeLong, owner of Danwith. I worked at Intuit for nearly 18 years, co-hosting today. Also with the Workshop Wednesdays over at School of Bookkeeping as well. And I'll go ahead and toss the ball over to Jennie and Ryan to introduce themselves.
Cool.
Awesome.
I'll go first. So we're known to talk over each other, so we'll see if we can successfully get through this webinar. But thank you, Dan and Michelle, wherever in the world when you listen back to this, for having us on for today's session. So for those of you that don't know us, with Ignition, formerly known as Practice Ignition. So I was trying to remember the last time we were on here, but it might have been when we were still Practice Ignition. So same company, same product, same people, just a different name and look. So we'll get into a bit of that later on. And then, yeah, we're here to talk about our state of client engagement. So a really cool research study we did towards the end of last year. And I'll go ahead and put the link just in the chat here, so you can go ahead and check it out if you haven't seen it already. But yeah, I will introduce my co-host. Jennie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Awesome. Yes, it's sure to be a great banter today. As Ryan says, we tend to co-present quite a lot, and it's a lot of fun. So my name is Jennie Moore. I'm the partnerships manager for Ignition. Ryan's awesome to work with. I love working for him. He's a great boss. And in my spare time, as some of us have, I'm also the founder of More Details. So I still have an active practice. It's going strong for 17 years. And I have it fully optimized now, where it runs on its own, obviously using Ignition, so that I can take my passion forward with Ignition. So excited to be here today.
And Jennie, I appreciate you being here, and that aspect of being a practice owner as well as your relationship with Ignition is a unique perspective, I think, and that's what brings a lot of credibility to what it is that you've experienced over the course of your tenure. So a little bit about the details about the QB Power Hour. It's every other Tuesday. Our upcoming webinars are available on our website, so you can check that out at qbpowerhour.com. The homepage there, see what's upcoming. Currently, they're not eligible for CPE. But if you need PDFs of the slides, the recordings, podcasts, and other resources, you can always head over to qbpowerhour.com/resources. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you have specific questions about anything that we're talking about here today, please put them in the Q&A. So down at the bottom of your Zoom console, there should be a Q&A section. That will bring up specific questions that Jennie or Ryan can speak to and address for things that we're talking about specifically here today. If you have just banter and comments, please put them in the chat. But I'm also noticing that I'm not seeing everyone in the listing of the chat. So if you can tell me who, if you can if you can put something in the chat just so that I can see, because I'm only seeing Jennie and Ryan's chats in the webinar chat. So maybe there's a new update at Zoom. I don't know. This is one of the things. Oh, there we go. Okay.
You just gotta wake them up.
But, now, oh, and I woke up the dog apparently. Live webinars, well, gotta love it. All right, and so if you have comments, please put them in the comments. If you have questions about anything that we're specifically talking about here, please put them in the Q&A, and then we also have the links there for the handouts. So today we're going to talk. There's a lot of wording in here, so we're going to talk about out of scope work. So last time on the Power Hour, we had Anna, I keep saying her name wrong, Anna Calderon, to talk about doing a paid diagnostic, which helps with out of scope work and a way to meet with customers or potential customers and make sure that that's happening. But this is one of the how, right? Like this is like how you do that as a person, as an individual engaging with your clients. So we'll talk a little bit about today about a mechanism that you have or a tool that you have in your tool belt to be able to make that a reality. Now the dog's here. My goodness, this is like this is like I'm Dan and Michelle at the same time, because she always has the dog interruptiveness. But this will be an interesting one for sure. But talk to me a little bit about this, Jennie or Ryan, about how to avoid leaving over 75,000 or 76,000 on the table when it comes to scope creep.
Yeah, I can take that. And would it be okay if I shared, Dan?
Yep, absolutely. I'll go ahead and stop sharing here.
Cool. And if I can manage to get this, we should be good. All right, so I think it would be most useful if we maybe kicked off. So Jennie, she will be handling explaining scope creep. We'll kind of dive into that. I think it's often a term that gets thrown around, but what exactly is it? How do you avoid it? And then we'll kind of layer over some of the information we found about the real costs of that scope creep from our state of client engagement. We'll talk about how you can kind of use this also as a revenue generating opportunity. So Dan just spoke about paid diagnostics. We'll give you some other tips on how you can actually turn scope creep into a way to ultimately generate more revenue in the firm. And as I said before, let's keep it interactive. So we'd love to hear your thoughts in the Q&A or the chat. But maybe let's get started with that first poll question. I think I have the ability, or do you want to do it, Dan?
I can launch it
Okay.
while you're
Cool.
talking about it. Yeah. Do your clients ask you to complete work that is outside of what you agreed to do? Is that like a given, Jennie? Do you, you find that's
It's a little bit of a leading question, yeah, but it helps us frame. I'm seeing a lot of sometimes, yeah.
One person said no, so that's good.
Oh, I love it.
We
gotta have the anchor. That's okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Shall we share those? Those look pretty neat. Oh, they're still voting. My goodness, active crowd.
Got a few people coming in. I think that's probably my biggest challenge is that I love to share, right? Like so it's often a challenge for me to know where that boundary is, like you want to give them something, to know that you're the what you're talking about, but where do you stop, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, and it can get awkward. That is for sure.
Yeah. All right, let me go ahead and just share the results. Looks like sometimes is the clear winner of, of that. So it certainly does depend.
And then
spoken like true accounting professionals with the it depends answer.
Yeah, I love it. Don't worry, accounting professionals. I got your back. I'm on here.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Jennie, maybe just kind of walk us through, in terms of you when you think about running your practice, like what is scope creep and just how would you explain it to others?
Yeah. And I'm really in this space right now. I love these poll questions because they lead up to help us in catering what this interactive session is all about. So please, like Dan and Ryan have said, please use the chat in the Q&A. There's no silly questions. I know I've had a lot in the last 17 years of running my practice, and we really do learn from each other. So do feel free to be vulnerable and ask questions. Yeah, so scope creep, usually when I talk about that, people are like, is that like a Halloween term or something? Like what exactly, like what? That sounds creepy. Sounds awkward, and it can be awkward. It certainly can be, especially if you're not managing it. But what specifically is scope creep? And scope creep is when a client asks you to complete work that falls outside of the agreement set forth with an engagement letter. Basically, when they ask you to do more than what you originally agreed to do. And if you sort of do the spit and handshake, wouldn't recommend that right now. But like if you kind of have that approach, you can see how this can impact you and your profitability, your people, and your processes by not managing it. And I won't get too far on a rant here, but for those that are on the sometimes clients ask us to do more, I feel like you're very much like myself when I was sort of midway through the 17-year point where I just answered sometimes because I didn't really know. I was just doing the work. I was just getting it done. I was just saying, I was like, yes, ma'am, and just got it done. And the more that you define your engagement, what you're going to do, and your processes, that's when you're going to manage scope creep and ultimately love it like I do. So hopefully we'll get into a little bit more about why you should love managing scope creep. Okay, I'm guessing by Ryan being on mute and me not that I'm allowed to keep going. So
yeah.
This is how it works at Ignition. Ryan and I are constantly bantering back and forth. But, you know, some people, when they think about scope creep, they're like, oh, that's that negative stuff. Like when a client integrates BigCommerce into, you know, their QBO file, or they have a new bank account, or they started using this really neat app and connected it. Like how many people like put in the chat right now, you have a client that just connects something and they're like, yay. And they thought they were helping. Right. And then they just created this huge issue. Right. Yes. Thank you, David. I'm glad David's paying attention. David's my favorite.
Or they change the app that they connected. It's like, oh, this was cheaper, or this was
exactly. I mean, and sometimes we have those negative things, right? Like I had a client that tried to help out with an expense app and he ended up pushing a bunch of data into his QBO file 3 times. That was hilariously fun. Yeah, because nothing says excitement on a Monday morning than seeing that happen. It was a good thing for SAS and having a bulk deleter. But anywho, I want you to frame scope creep as a positive. Some people think of it as a negative, like, oh, they have e-commerce now, or oh, they hired 5 more employees, or oh, they did a new bank account, or they're going after a different revenue vertical. Stop and think about this. They're growing. They're like children, right? Children grow. We don't chastise our children for growing, even though mine are growing like crazy right now and I have to buy pants all the time. But you don't want to chastise growth. Growth is a healthy, natural thing. But our clients are going to rely on us to help manage that. So when you're incurring scope creep, it's actually a positive. They're growing. It's you that has to start realizing, how do you grow with them? And that's the importance of having a solid engagement with solid processes and clearly written out scope so that you can spin it as a positive. So with my clients, when let's say my engineering firm hires 5 more employees, this is the one we were talking about, QBO projects that you were diagnosing for me. That's very popular. They're growing like crazy. Well, I'm not going to say, darn you. Don't you know how much work 5 more employees are to put on this and that? It's like, okay, hey, thank you, Mr. Smith. I love that you are growing. This is awesome. We are going to grow with you. We're going to set up our new engagement to help you and take you to this next payroll stage, right? Like we instead of using hours, we use different metrics to grow our firm, because our revenue as a practice owner should also be increasing as we're helping our clients increase their profits too. Doesn't that make sense? Like
totally.
They grow, we grow.
We grow. Yeah. Yeah, I was in a business networking group, and the marketing consultant has that mindset where his fees are tied to revenue, and so obviously, if his metric is to grow their revenue, then
Yeah,
his fees are tied to that. So it's equally as beneficial.
exactly. It's a reward driven process, right? And part of me being able to bring in new clients is I articulate that in advance, right? Our job is to help you grow. Like that's what our unique relationships are about, is growing. And I fully front end the conversation that our engagement will change. They will change. There's things that are going to change that we are not going to know about, right? So it's a positive. So everyone's cool with this. Scope creep is a positive.
All right, let's
So
start
now
off the
let's look at
next.
so our second poll question here. So I think the most popular answer was sometimes their clients are asking for more. So now there's kind of a part two to this. What do you do? How do you evaluate that scope creep? So maybe sometimes they ask for the more work, and sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't. Or maybe you're actually creating a new engagement or updating the existing engagement. And then, I hope you're, as Jenny mentioned, using it as a way to ultimately increase your service offerings and hopefully have a way to get paid for that too. Jenny, any other comments on evaluating scope creep?
Yeah, it's definitely something that takes practice to do. And the best way to evaluate scope creep is making sure you have open cadence and communication with your clients and stellar workflows, right? Especially if you're working with a virtual team like myself, you don't want them working on work that you haven't agreed to do to be paid for. It opens a huge liability risk, for one, but two, it also impacts your team, their performance, and ultimately your profits. So scope creep, when not managed well, can be really devastating to your practice. I learned that the hard way.
Is that how everybody learns? Like like is that seems to be the you got to make your own mistakes in order to realize, no, I didn't like the way that worked out. Or
Yeah.
like, I mean, how do people learn to say no? I think that is
Oh, it's
that
huge.
is that's the big challenge, I think, for a new practitioner, is where do I, because we want to be people pleasers. We want to do, we want to, if someone asks of us a request, and says, and you don't want to be that person that says no. I
Yeah.
think, for the most part, I'm sure there's other people out there like, nope, 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 nope.
Yeah.
Has no problem saying no.
It's a good thing because like we did a huge study on that. Those are awkward conversations, right? Like they are awkward when, listen, us as an accounting professionals, how many remember getting the CD in the mail for QuickBooks and you were like super stoked about it? Like obviously desktop, right? Like we were like paper, desk, cubicle, didn't have to interact a whole lot. We just did it based on an hourly rate. And now we have to be more financial therapists and really articulate things well because things are changing
That's an
so
interesting
much,
way to
right?
say it.
Oh, I'm totally a financial
Yeah.
therapist.
Sit on
Yeah,
the couch.
but it's all awkward conversations. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into our findings, but really, Dan, what that boils down to is us having the conversation, us having the confidence to assert the elephant in the room and embrace the awkward conversation. It's going to help you, and your clients want you to do that. They really do. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's how do you evaluate scope creep? Ryan, do you want to share some of these stats?
Yeah, so looking at the results here, a bit of a mix. I think the majority here is after the fact and hoping to get paid for it. So in that case, maybe there could be some hourly project billing where you're then, going in and invoice and saying, hey, client, by the way, there was some out of scope work. Please hopefully pay this invoice. some credit to engagement. So we'll talk about how Ignition can potentially help with that. But yeah, I think anytime there's a scope change and you're requesting new fees for services, and them sign off on that in case of a dispute is probably going to be your best bet there. We still have a good chunk that are not managing at all, which basically means, hey, you know what, this is just we're just going to eat this, and it's kind of a cost of doing business. But hopefully we can talk about some ways that we can avoid that moving forward, and hopefully recoup some of those real dollars that are getting left on the table. So we're going to talk about the State of Client Engagement report now. Again, I just put that link back in to the chat there. So we're not going to go through the full report here, but we do want to go through some of the key highlights. So this was done by a third party, YouGov. We actually ran this survey in the US as well as the UK and Australia. And similarly, this is a global problem. What we'll go through today is the result from our US market study, but very interesting. Similarly, all across the world, there's pretty similar figures and pretty similar findings. This isn't country or region specific, and I think you could even think this list likely does span across broader professional services too, not just with accounting and bookkeeping firms too. So first kind of highlights that ultimately $76,636 is what unrecovered out of scope work costs the average US accounting and bookkeeping firm on year on average. Jennie, do you have any comments from that, or what does that number kind of say to you, or does that resonate? I mean, I'm not a practice owner; I'm just from the Ignition side, but do you think?
I'm just from the Ignition side. Ryan's been with Ignition since almost day one. Don't let him fool you. Oh, I have lots to say about this. The trick will be getting me to be quiet. So Dan, you got your cowbell ready to ring?
All right.
Or the dog barking?
Right. Yeah. Well,
he's
ready.
He's ready, right? That's totally cool. I love my dogs and my cats too. This is legit. This is an independent study. This isn't like an internal survey we did. We paid for this external study to be done independent with accounting professionals. And I knew the cost of out of scope work was high, but I honestly didn't believe it was this high. But when you think about, there's my Canadian accent coming in, I apologize. But when you think in relation to us avoiding that awkward conversation that Dan had alluded to, like it's easier for us just to do the work and hope we get paid after the fact. What was it? There was several of you, 44% of you said that. That's your $76,000, right? Or it's the not managing, which was 25%. When you go ahead and do the work without having the okay, the blessing, the digital signature from your client, you're opening so much risk. One is being paid. Let's just focus on that for a minute. Paying ourselves is really important. And us as accounting professionals, we tend not to. And I know this firsthand with all of the speaking I have done and research I've done in industry. We pay ourselves very little, right? So one is getting paid. One is impacting our team because they're frustrated, right? You haven't managed the scope properly, and now they're having to reactively do something to meet a deadline. And then we have the liability issue. Like you've just done work that the client had not approved you to do, which can open up errors and omissions issues. But by just avoiding that conversation, like I say calling up because I'm still from that era, right? But like getting on a Zoom call with a client to say, hey, we have an issue we need to address with you. You didn't let us know that you integrated Shopify or something. And this is going to cause additional work for us to meet this timeline. Right? It's about being open and honest. It's not your fault that the client has gone out of scope. It's like driving a broken car into a mechanic shop and blaming the mechanic because you didn't do an oil change for 100,000 kilometers and you rode in on 4 broken tires. That's not the mechanic's fault. It's your fault as the driver. And so being able to, really differentiate the ownership of the issue, but in a compassionate way is really important. And being clear that, hey, you're here to help. You're here to help. And making sure that you're being paid for your efforts. In my entire client base, I only have one client that comes to me and says, hey, Jennie, I have scope creep. Every other client, like legit, he's so trained. He's an engineer. He's very right this, right? But all my other clients have to be educated that as they grow and as they make changes, that there is a benefit to that with our services. And honestly, that's how I make money. As I'm able to work with Ignition, my job is to hire, fire, and take blame for anything that goes wrong, and give my credit card for my practice whenever I want something. But managing scope creep is how I make money. Literally. I don't do a yearly price increase. It's not romantic. It's not fun. It's hard to prove. I manage scope creep every day, all day with our processes. And the process is when there's an issue with a customer wanting something done by my virtual team, my team slaps me on Slack. And it's my job to determine, is this out of scope or is it not? And then to have the awkward conversation. So I make money. I think I deserve it.
So let's talk a little bit more about those awkward conversations. So another kind of survey we had, our survey question was, are you experiencing these potentially awkward conversations with your clients, and what are they about? As we can see, the leader there at the top is 94% of folks surveyed found themselves having an awkward conversation chasing clients for late payments. So again, no one wants to have that conversation. You're catching up with your client, whether they're a business owner and you're helping them provide value. I don't think you want to start that conversation by asking them about the 2 unpaid invoices that you had. Jennie, further comments on this or any of the other ones you want to call out here? I think there's everyone is over 87% that's on the screen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would say the biggest pain point of not having a solid engagement, yes, I know you guys understand the importance of an engagement letter, and I know they're super awkward and they're not fun. By the way, Ignition makes them super fun and it's awesome. We make engagements engaging. But the biggest pain point, if we want to front end that, is getting paid. Like, I remember the days of going to the mailbox and hoping there was a check in there, and having these passive aggressive feelings with my clients because I'm doing all this work. Why haven't they paid me? Don't they know my worth? That was my problem. I wasn't articulating what my worth and what my value is by using a proper platform to do it. So I would say, if you're feeling the pain point of not, something as basic as chasing payments, that's something that needs to have that awkward conversation up front. And when I help accounting professionals, they usually scaling new heights. We had one client came to us at the booth 6 months behind on invoicing. We were able to help him, being able to take him to the now and solve the problem, educate him on, okay, you're going to have this huge amount of AR with your clients. Maybe it's time to think about reactive payment plans. There's things you can do with our app and different technology. The important thing that I have in my firm, I don't do any work until I get paid. I don't. And I may be accused of being a princess or a really smart entrepreneur. And I don't know about you guys, I can't fly anywhere in the world unless I pay for the flight first. So that's the approach I take. And that's also defining the type of clients I work for as well. So first, if you're having problems with getting paid or managing that, it's really important to look for a solution, because that's the lifeblood to our organization.
Yeah, I think that's part of where I see the challenge is, proving yourself, proving your worth, especially with the projects that I do, and then I find myself around, is that you almost have to have some part of the deliverable done in order for them to realize, oh, there's value there. But you can say, yeah, this is what'll happen. This is part of engaging our services, but there's costs up front that need to be paid and those types of things at first, and it's typically a first time meeting, right? So you have no history. You don't know if they're going to cut and run. If you give them their data file or something like that and they haven't paid, and now that it's gone, I think that's part of
protect yourself first.
Personal challenge that I have, and I'm sure other people have the same thing.
Yeah, something as simple as collecting like a deposit up front or retainer, whatever fancy word we want to put on. It's super important. It shows trust, like they're trusting you with their financial bookkeeping story or their financial story, right? We have to have trust go the other way as well. And it's okay to be assertive. It's okay to ask to be paid. And chances are, like, our clients actually do want to pay us. We just make it super awkward for them to do it. Like, we just make it awkward. So let's make it less awkward for people to pay us. Okay, Ryan, your turn.
So next finding here, I'm going to have to look back at the poll question answers in this one. So if you look at what percentage of firms are absorbing the costs, I think we were around 44% on our poll here. And here it's 43. Yeah. So I think it's an accurate representation of the market both ways. But yeah, I think, you know, a lot of firms, as we've kind of hit this point home, is you know, you're just kind of absorbing those costs because you don't want to have those awkward conversations.
Yeah.
And it's, maybe next year's engagement letter, or the next time, or next year we'll raise prices. And it's just kind of that, you know, push it forward and absorb it. Jenny, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah.
Here we go. A little bit already.
Okay, everyone listening? Here we go. We're going deep.
Sitting down.
Listen up. So yes, honestly, it's far more easier just to give the kid the candy bar and have them shut up for 30 minutes, right? Like, we all know this, right? But, you know, just ignoring this issue is so devastating to your practice. You don't want to absorb it. I already talked about the risk and the payments and your people. But the other thing that's, you know, important to think about here, you know, most of you are probably feeling this right now. Like, okay, I know I should talk to Mr. Smith about this, but you're also probably thinking in your head that you don't have anything to stand on because you weren't clear enough with what exactly you were going to do. Okay. So you're feeling like, hey, Mr. Smith, you know, when we did our little chat, you didn't mention, let's take in that Shopify account again, right? Like, you didn't mention you were doing e-commerce, and last year you didn't do it. You know what Mr. Smith is thinking? Mr. Smith is thinking, he's generalizing you. He's generalizing your services. Like, don't you do this? Like, don't you do accounting? Don't you do bookkeeping? Don't you do tax? You haven't educated your clients, right? So most of us, because we haven't set that up, we're going to absorb it, because then it's so awkward to come back to that conversation and try and prove that this is different, right? Protect yourself up front with a really well-defined proposal on exactly what you're going to do, and let us at Ignition be the bad guys. Like, it's like the rules in the playground, right? No horseplay, no running around the pool. Everyone goes back to the rules. Come back to the rules. Like, these are the rules of engagement. This is what we agreed to do. Download the PDF with the digital signature if you want, whatever the case is. But when you bring the client back to, this is what we agreed to do, and this was the price, this is what we can do, and this is the new price, that's when they go, oh, okay, I get it. But if you've trained them that you are a generalized bookkeeper, accountant, tax preparer, of course they're going to think you do it for that rate, regardless of how much information you give them. And it makes it awkward for us to prove our value.
Yeah, I've seen other bookkeepers, you know, in their engagement letters where they'll say, well, I handle AR and AP. Like, wow, okay, that's it. I mean, that's all you say about that.
Oh,
like, there are
boy.
so many facets that could potentially, you know, I mean, you just laid it out there, that, you know, to your point, like, you wrote a blank check. Yeah, right.
You wrote a blank check. Exactly, Dan. You totally got my psychic vibe there. You just wrote a blank check. Who would give a blank check to anybody? Right? No. So don't blank check your services. Okay. Do we got that? That should be like a new tag thing. So start defining exactly what you're going to do with a really good proposal. Bring in that letter of engagement, bring in payments. That's what's going to protect you. It's going to protect your team. It's going to protect your profits. It's going to protect your processes. It's worth it.
There's that Canadian sneaking in there again.
And of course, I got to apologize for it too.
I think it's endearing.
an interesting.
That's good.
An interesting point. You know, I think we're going to get into a few tips now. So I think we've got 5 tips here on how you can kind of embrace this and ultimately make it a revenue generator. But I think an interesting one is this first point is kind of the mindset shift. I think, I think that's ultimately from my side, I feel like that's what's holding a lot of folks back is, just wanting to always cater to that client. And Jennie, do you want to kind of speak about the Jedi mindset a little bit here?
Sure.
And I think we've got another one after this too.
Yeah, this is a tip of the hat to my friend Joshua Lance. He really got this through to me, and I wasn't thinking of it as the Jedi mindset. I was thinking a little different. But basically, this is for me to give you the inspiration. So I'm giving you the problem, potential solutions, and now I'm feeding you with sunshine. So pay attention. One thing we find as accounting professionals is we tend to go into practice to become our own boss, right? Maybe you broke it on your own, or me, I left a high stress job in finance and thought that starting a business with a newborn baby was going to be less stress, but that turned out not to be true. Anywho, but chances are you went into this process, this business, because you wanted to be your own boss. And then you quickly find out by not embracing these awkward conversations that you have many bosses. You thought one boss was bad. How about a whole fleet and stable of them? And that's because of training your clients that, they're the boss. They're in the position of power. They're the ownership, when really you are the expert and you are the one that they are seeking the advice from. So it's similar to a parent relationship or a pet relationship. There has to be some sort of division of responsibilities and control. I just said control. As accounting professionals, I know you love that word. I know you love control. So we need to retain that, but of course, in a very compassionate way as well. We need to guide our clients through this. We want to be able to show our compassion. Hey, we're here to help you. Like, hey, Mr. Smith, I'm here to help you. But you've just integrated this that's going to cause a huge issue. Coinbase, which is cryptocurrency, integrated into Shopify for one client. So you got two choices. One, you can get our new engagement letter, which is double, or you can turn it off. He opted to turn it off. Okay. But I was in the position of power to be able to say, this is going to cause additional work and valuation for us, right? Always be the one that's leading, right? That's important as well. And it's okay if nobody, not if all your clients kind of follow you in that way. Like, you're not going to please everybody. Not, it's just the way life is. And what's really important is you need to determine the type of clients you're going to work for. Okay. And sometimes that means some hard decisions. I've had to make some hard decisions as I transferred to cloud accounting with some desktop clients. Unfortunately, I had to finally make the leap. I had to make a change, and I had to say goodbye to some really awesome clients that have seen my children grow up, but I made sure they had a great place to be. They just weren't part of my future plan. Okay. So it's really important to think about who we are. And this is a really personal story. This is how I keep very centric on who I'm going to work for. I won't go into details of this bad client experience, but let's just say it ended up with him throwing a broom at me. So you go ahead and laugh and giggle and be in awe and shock about that, but it legit happened. I got a broom thrown at me. So as I was, out of the, I literally rode the broom out of this restaurant, just so you know, just the type of candid personality you're talking to right now. So as I'm sitting, reflecting on this bad client experience, I'm thinking to myself, like, I did everything right. I reconciled or reported to, at this point, it was a Canadian client. I have US clients now, but I reported to Canada Revenue Agency. I did everything right. Then as I'm walking, I'm feeling like a fire-breathing dragon, and I realized I didn't do everything right. I didn't value myself. And I had a bit of a walk home, and I realized I need to start defining who I'm going to work for. And this is where Dragon has come in. This is my own client methodology. You can steal it. You can use it. Many people in industry have. I'm all for it. But whoever we do work for should resonate with you in some sort of capacity. At Ignition, we call that ideal client profile. And that's what really this is. Who are you going to work for? Who is your ideal client? And my Dragon is an acronym: delightful people. I don't want to deal with moody people and aggressive people. I fire those people. Sometimes they get past our discovery call, but hey, they're out. I do not keep people that are not delightful, respectful. I give respect. My team deserves respect as well. We've had instances of that as well. I'm a big girl on articulate. We got to talk. We have to have cadence and communication. If you're just expecting me to take on your bookkeeping or your tax to solve your problems, we're not a good fit. Okay, we need to really define what we're going to do and whose responsibilities. I mentioned how I make money is through managing scope, right? Scope creep. So therefore, what do I want? Growth-minded individuals. I don't want to bring individuals into my firm that are always like, well, this is the way we've always done it, and I have no ambitions to grow. Whew, well, we're not going to have any scope creep, so that's not a good fit for us. For me, online is really important. I do love desktop products. They're really robust, but just where I am with my tech stack, everything's online. So if I have a client that insists on being on desktop, no disrespect, it's just not going to work for us. It's just not going to work. I know there's hosting. I've done it. I love it as well. Love the product, but we're here. These are our tools. This is my recipe. Okay. And in our niche or niche, there's the Canadian side coming out again. We work with consultants, digital agencies, all those types of individuals. We don't work with restaurants and lawyers. I've done that. Didn't like it very much. So the goal is to find go Canada, I love it. Define who you're going to work for. And that's going to help you in having some of these awkward conversations. Okay, Ryan, I'll be quiet now.
No, I think that's that dragon mindset is I think everyone should I feel everyone should steal that, but maybe they can come up with their own acronyms if
it helps you.
I'd love to hear from anyone else. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Need to highlight these tips here because we're being mindful of the hour. We're almost at 9:41 here. So,
yeah.
Or 41 past the hour. So let's.
Yeah, I think we're pretty good. I think we've talked quite a few about these. So
speaking about things that we could talk all the time for the whole hour about is probably pricing. But I think we did. We talked a little bit about this, and Jennie, do you want to have any other comments on kind of reflecting on price with your clients and
I'll try and keep it brief because it's a whole nother subject. Like pricing is subjective. That's the biggest thing we need to understand. Your hourly rate that you may be using is subjective as well. So how I get around pricing and the confidence for it is, first of all, understanding there's room for error. Like there's just, you know what, if we wanted to be perfect, we'd use Excel, and then it would still be subjective because your variables and your inputs are still subjective. So for me, it's building confidence around pricing, and how I do that is with a proper due diligence. I love due diligences. Ryan knows this. I just love due diligences. So having a really good discovery call is important. It's really hard for me to be quiet, as you've learned on this webinar, but listening to the pain points, what are the problems, asking for source documentation, and really filling out a really good proposal. We've seen people do like the paid discovery. Help me, Dan. There was a really neat term.
Diagnostic, was it?
Paid diagnostic. I like those words. Right? Where you're not fixing, you're just analyzing, giving them a report card. I think that's what helps us understand our value as well. What you don't want to do, we want to stop writing these open checks, right, Dan? I love this. Let's just stop. Like, I know it is money, but it's also an open check to our time bank. And let's stop doing that. Okay, tip number 3. Maybe we've hit that one, hopefully.
So I'm going to skip through a couple of these because I am conscious of time, but so embracing those awkward conversations, you will get the slides afterwards. So we touched on some of these, but I recommend come back and look over these tips for navigating those awkward conversations. We know that we can't eliminate them all, but yeah, I think is how we can navigate them and turn them into positives instead of negatives would be great. Another tip is setting those right expectations. So when we do talk about ignition here shortly, we'll dig into this a bit more, but ultimately being able to explain what it is the services you're providing up front and having that aligned to the price that you want to charge and also the value you're delivering to your clients. But we'll touch on that a bit later on, but I think that's a really important distinction there. Sales process, again, we'll talk about this a little bit later on. Jennie spoke about it a bit here. If you haven't documented your sales process before, what it looks like to have a new client, what it looks like to re-engage an existing client, tons of little tips here. I don't know, Jenny, if you had a couple of takeaways on the sales process.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is have the cadence and communication. Do your due diligence, have open conversations up front. Don't quote on something you don't know, right? So standardizing the sales process is making sure you fully understand the client's state of affairs.
So, ultimately how technology can help. But let's talk about a real world example. Dan, do you want to maybe kick us off with the recent news, and then we can kind of brainstorm together on some ways on how you all can deal with this change?
Yeah. So if you hadn't gotten the email yesterday, you will likely be getting your customers talking about it, because QuickBooks Point of Sale, the desktop product, is at its end of life, and Intuit is communicating its strategy. I've written a blog post about it, so you can always check us out at the School of Bookkeeping.com about that. There's a link for it in there, and we're going to unpack actually this news on the workshop tomorrow. So if I put a link there to register for the workshop Wednesday tomorrow, and then Michelle and I will also unpack it on our next QB Power Hour. But that's 2 weeks from now, so who knows what what changes might happen till then. But if you have clients that are in the retail segment and they are using QuickBooks Point of Sale, this is now a technology circumstance of scope creep, and now what's happening with those customers versus what are their options, and what do you as an accounting professional actually need to have that conversation about, right, Jenny?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the way I handle those awkward conversations when it comes to changes in technology, and this one's a big one, right? And if anyone has any concerns, like reach out to us, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've done a lot of data migrations and stuff as well. So we know there's different options for it. The main thing is to be very articulate. There's that A again, right? And exactly the type of platforms and technology you're using with that engagement. So for instance, like what's their financial management system? I mean, QuickBooks Online, what's the point of sale system, the ownership of that all that good stuff, right? In this case, usually the point of sale system is the ownership of the client, and you're here to help them and consult and determining their options. You want to make sure that they have the options. We know we have Lightspeed, we have Shopify as well. There's lots of other options. Maybe your customer has a preferred option. But being very clear about, it sounds like it's time for a new engagement to be written if this is what you're going to come up against. And it's a great time to reinvent your process to help as well. But labeling out the technology, exactly how you will help with that technology, who's responsible for the procurement and training of that technology, is really vital to nail out in an engagement. And it's something that's helped us quite a bit in protecting our team and profits, and also make more money as well, because training is not free. Stop giving away training.
Exactly.
So yeah, as Dan mentioned,
go ahead.
Be some time to kind of digest this news and join the next sessions to kind of figure out what next, if this is impacting you or any of your clients. If we had to break the news to you now, hopefully it's not too shocking, and we'll be able to navigate this together, and you're all fired up now because now you know how to manage scope creep. So hopefully you'll have a couple of tips. But we do want to go over some of the technology, and we want to give a brief overview of Ignition. So ultimately, Ignition will sit at the front end of your client engagements to allow you to scope out your work. And then, we also recommend you have a workflow solution as well, too. So in this case, we've got something like a Carbon. There's other workflow solutions out there, too, but ultimately a way for you and your team to manage the scope. So ideally, at the front end of the engagement, you've had your clients agree to those services and prices. And then ultimately, you've got a way to track that work through to completion. So again, using tools like Ignition and Carbon can really kind of help manage that scope creep, since you've got that signed up on up front, and then the work is being completed and by who. So some of the time savings, a part of that study as well, we got with Ignition. So, a few big stats here on how much they're saving per week. So over 6 hours creating proposals and engagement letters, 9 hours on billing, collecting, and reconciling payments, and also saving time on managing scope creep. So again, Ignition not only will help you get paid for your services, but hopefully give you and your team a lot of time back. So maybe that could be spending more time with family, maybe it could be growing the business, or maybe it could be, reallocating your team to more high value work. Bit more about Ignition. So we are an accounting firm down in Sydney, Australia. So our founder, Guy Pearson, was running his own kind of cloud-based accounting firm that he started originally back in 2009. And while he was growing that firm, he ran into a whole bunch of kind of issues around growing his firm, around scope creep, around getting paid for his services. So he couldn't find a solution out in the market. So that's when he decided to found Ignition. So since then, we now operate all over the world, and we work with it says 5,000 there. We're now over 6,000 accounting and bookkeeping firms all around the world use Ignition to manage their client engagements and collect payments. I think
that speaks a lot to to the power of Ignition, in that it was someone in a practitioner who found their own solution, right? So they understand the pain of basically built their own solution, but they understand the pain of what they were trying to solve for, because it just didn't exist to the way that they were working with it at that point. So I think that's one of the things that we love here at the Power Hour, is that when you truly understand the pain, the prescription is a lot. It's a little easier of a pill to swallow.
Totally. And Jennie, maybe I'll pick on you. We've got this on the screen here showing what the traditional way of engaging clients is. Maybe just give it a little bit of, before Ignition, what was that process like? And then maybe how it changed when you did find Ignition.
Can I just be honest? I can be honest, right?
Yes.
I screwed up. I screwed up. I messed, like Dan, we talked about this at the beginning. Like, I messed up. I really did. So in 2016, that's when I started using Ignition. Before that, no shame to those that have this process. I was using Word, looking at it 3 times at 3 o'clock in the morning, because with 3 children at home, that seemed to be the time to look at engagement letters. And I, did a due diligence. I did a discovery call, was waiting for this client to sign our engagement, thought I did it really well. They loved all the chats we had, how we were going to solve their problems, and I didn't hear anything back. I talked about this at Scaling New Heights. For those, if this sounds like a repeat, I apologize. But eventually I just sought out that prospect and went, hey, did you get my proposal? Because at that time it was $1,000 a month. And I was, really looking forward to having that client. And it was a big client, and thought I was going to win that client. And I got that awkward pause. And that pause was the client saying that they are going to go with another provider. And I talk about embracing an awkward conversation. I knew the only way I was going to fix, obviously, why I lost this client was to ask more questions. And I think that's what we need to do. Embrace the awkward, embrace the suck, ask questions, right? And then how that came to be is the client said, well, Jennie, we loved how you were able to think about solving our problems, but when you sent us that proposal, it was really archaic. And I went, ooh. And it was really old fashioned. And I went, ooh. And then they really hit me. They're like, how are you going to solve our own problems if you haven't even solved your own onboarding process? Whoops. So that's when I realized I needed something that matched my brand, that matched the technology I was using, that made things simple and automatic, that made it less awkward for them to sign an engagement. And I found that. I figured there had to be an app for that. And I met Tom and the Ignition team, and they solved my problem.
So thanks for sharing that, Jennie. I'm just going to pop up our last poll here for those of you on here, and then I'll kind of speak to this as well. So as Jennie mentioned before, ultimately with Ignition, makes this whole process much easier. So it starts with that digital proposal. We can collect payment information upfront from your clients. So we can process both ACH and card payments. So you get paid on the schedule that you want. you don't have any accounts receivable. So you hopefully won't be one of those 94% having to have those awkward conversations around getting paid. And then ultimately integrating into the rest of your workflow. So integrations into QuickBooks Online and then other practice applications you might use to run your firm. So we've got that poll question in there. So we just want to know what your next steps might be with Ignition. We've also got a link to book a demo and create a free trial. So if you did want to check it out a little bit more from your own, and then just kind of leave with a few stats. Ignition, we've had over 1 million clients engaged across those 6,000 practices, over 2 million proposals accepted, and processed over 3 billion in client payments. So, at the point now that we've really optimized the system to make it easier for you to engage your clients and seeing some real world scale all over the world. And then another interesting one here around proposal acceptance rates. So just being able to get your proposal out the door within Ignition, we have an 80% historical acceptance rate, and 45% of those are going to be accepted within the first hour. So we've got that last poll question on the screen and would love to kind of open it up for any questions. I think we've got a couple minutes. Dan, any comments from you on what we just went over?
No, I just wanted to remind folks that we've had Ignition come on the QB Power Hour several times, and if you go to the QB Power Hour website, you can search for the Ignition prior webinars. One of which was a deeper dive, like what Ignition looks like on the underneath the hood, so to speak, and how you can now if you're trying to manage your scope creep, how you can kind of play those two together. If you don't want to reach out right away, you can review that webinar and see how it can manage the scope creep.
Jennie, any tips from you? I know you've left us with a whole bunch of advice throughout this webinar. Maybe what your key takeaways for folks might be.
Yes, and I do have compassion for my fellow accounting pros that are busy into tax season. I'm impressed. There's so many people on this call today, so you must be looking for some comical relief, and hopefully you got that. But yeah, definitely. I know it's difficult to switch, flight plans when you're flying during tax season. But what I would encourage you to do is, as you're going through tax season and as you're going through processes, whether you're a tax professional or not, maybe you're offering other services, is follow the pain points. And I know it sounds somewhat strange to do that, but if there's a pain point, there's not only a pain point with you, there's probably a pain point with your team and a friction point with your customer. So that's one thing I've always done, is follow the pain point. Again, with my screw up with my proposal that I divulged to you, it was following the pain and then looking at my options to fix it. So if the problems are collecting payments, look for a solution that does that in a compliant, safe, secure way. Yes, shameless plug, Ignition does that. If you're finding it difficult to have those conversations with clients because you haven't exactly articulated what you're going to do, yes, shameless plug again. Ignition's really good at helping you with that. We have templates I've created, industry experts have created, that are ready to go. If you're finding it difficult to know where to start, we've done the hard work for you. You can customize it as you go. And we have a really neat process for tax professionals where you can send out many engagements within a matter of moments, which makes it super easy and efficient to not only make sure you get paid, but also to make sure you're compliant as well. So it's just about knowing what your options are. There's no pressure here. We're all friends, but I would encourage you to follow the pain points and find an app to fix that gap.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for being here today. I think it was really super informative and comical. At least the dog decided to calm down. So we appreciate you joining us here, Jennie and Ryan. As always, check out the qbpowerhour.com and look for our upcoming webinars, not just for the Power Hour, but also other ones as well. So we appreciate you joining us today, and look forward to seeing you next time on the QB Power Hour, and you all have a great day.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Take
Sam.
care.